Staying on the topic of Ukraine and moving into the country itself, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has dismissed his top military commander. General Valeriy Zaluzhnyi had been commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces. He is regarded by many as a national hero for overseeing Ukraine's war efforts since Russia's full-scale invasion started. That was back in February of 2022. He'll now be replaced by the commander of Ukraine's ground forces, Oleksandr Syrskyi.
The Iron General of Ukraine, Valeriy Zaluzhnyi, is widely known as a symbol of resistance against Russia. He had led the Ukrainian army as commander-in-chief since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022, successfully pushing back in the first months of the war. News of his dismissal was confirmed in an address by President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, citing a need for a reshuffle.
I'm grateful to General Zaluzhnyi for 2 years of protection. We spoke frankly today about what needs to change in the army, urgent changes. I suggested to General Zaluzhnyi to be in the team of the Ukrainian state in the future. I will be grateful for his consent.
Zelenskyy claimed that most commanders leading war efforts in Ukraine have not experienced the front lines firsthand, and said it was time for a new approach. He named Oleksandr Syrskyi, the head of Ukraine's ground forces, to take charge of the military. Syrskyi is known for leading Ukraine's defense in the city of Bakhmut, where Ukraine fought one of the bloodiest battles, and for defending Kyiv. In the streets of Kyiv, the news sparked mixed reactions.
I do not think this is the right time. This is not the time to fire the army chief. This is a very odd decision. I think that we know our enemy, and it is not Zaluzhnyi. I'm very upset. I don't know about others, but I'm very upset. This is a signal that worries me.
Zelensky's plan to revamp Ukraine's military comes amid months of uncertainty in Ukraine. The conflict is at a stalemate, and there are questions over whether Kyiv will receive additional military aid from the U.S.
Mike Martin is a former British Army officer and senior fellow in the Department of War Studies at King's College London. Mike, welcome back to DW. First up, how unusual is a change of military leadership in the middle of a bitterly fought war?
It depends really on how well your war's going. If the war's going well, then you don't change the leadership. But clearly there have been some stumbles over the last year, and a change of leadership is useful to change direction, but also I think to signal a change of direction. So if you've got some allies who are perhaps a little reticent, changing your leadership is a big signal that you're about to change direction with your strategy.
Do you think this is more about sending a signal than about making actual changes, though?
I think it's both. So last year we had the counteroffensive, which really was a failure. Ukraine made very little progress where it needed to make progress, largely because the Russians had prepared extensive defences. And now with the tail off of Western supplies, it's very likely that the war will remain stalemated and Ukraine won't be able to make advances on the ground, particularly while we're waiting for the US presidential elections. And so I think there is going to be a different direction, and this is a way of signalling it.
Now, to observers, this move didn't come as much of a surprise because there had been a lot of speculation about a rift between Zelenskyy and Zaluzhnyi. Do you think that could have factored into this shakeup?
Definitely. And as so often, these things are about politics as well as personalities. So Zaluzhnyi organised the defence of Ukraine in 2022, so he will forever have his place in the history books. But really, as I've alluded to, the counteroffensive in 2023 was a bit of a failure. That was Zaluzhny's plan. And since then, Zelenskyy and Zaluzhnyi have differed over strategy, including this really important question of conscription. How do we get the manpower into Ukraine's armed forces? But there is another thing as well. Zaluzhnyi is very popular, and is seen as a potential future rival to Zelenskyy. And it's not unknown, Eisenhower commanded Allied forces in the Second World War, then went on to be president. So it's a well-known path. And so some people are saying that perhaps Zelenskyy thought, do you know what, I can just downgrade Zaluzhny's stature and that will make my political life easier as well.
Mm-hmm. He says he will remain on the team, though. What can you tell us about the new commander-in-chief, Oleksandr Syrskyi?
So Syrskyi was born in Russia in 1965, so in the Soviet Union as it was then, and served in the Soviet armed forces, including in Afghanistan. Most recently, he's been the commander of ground forces, as you said in your package, and he was responsible for the defense of Kyiv in the initial invasion, for which he was ordered, which he was given a medal. I mean, an amazing piece of work. And he also led the offensive into Kharkiv. It's difficult to say from that history exactly what he's going to do, but I think we know, of course, he will have discussed with Zelenskyy this new change of approach, and that is the reason why he will have been appointed. So I think we're going to see some changes in the way Ukraine approaches the war.
Yeah. President Zelenskyy says Ukraine needs a realistic battle plan. You talk about a change of approach. What would that have to look like?
So I think it's commonly accepted that the ground battle has reached a stalemate, and I think will remain there until after the US presidential election. Until we get clarity geopolitically as to what the levels of Western support will be, the ground war is not going to move. And I think over the last month or so, we've seen the inklings of what the new Ukrainian strategy is. There's been increased attacks on Russian gas and oil terminals. There's been the sinking of Russian ships. So I think Ukraine is going to hold the ground war as it is, and it's going to strike at Russia's economic power. Because if Russia can't sell its oil and gas, then it can't afford to continue the war at the same pace. And so I think this is the new strategy that we're going to see whilst we wait for the results of the US presidential election.
Yeah. Mike, I want to bring up something else, because all of this comes as Russian forces are focused on taking the town of Avdiivka. This battle has been going on for 4 months now. What's the status there?
It's a little bit like, I don't know if your viewers remember Bakhmut, where it went backwards and forwards and eventually the Russians took it at great loss. Avdiivka is a very, very similar story. The Russians have been throwing large numbers of troops at it. They do have overmatch over Ukrainian forces, so they have more, artillery shells and more personnel. And the Ukrainians have been fighting for several months now, quite a slow withdrawal, whilst inflicting maximum damage on the Russians. If I had to guess, I would say the Russians are probably going to take the town, the city, in the coming days. Does that change the overall picture? Not hugely.
That was Mike Martin from King's College in London. Thank you so much. Always great to get your take on things.
Thanks.